All right. Well, good evening. This is Dr. Cremens, of course. I have just a couple of last reminders for your first paper. So this is really just a short video that'll sum up the other ones that I posted on this assignment. So first thing is to please make sure you've watched, the other videos, particularly the one that goes through the structure of the paper, because that'll be really helpful. And that kind of, gives you an outline for the essay. I'll do that for all the essays that we do. You'll always have a video, posted at least a week in advance before the paper's due, with the suggested structure and ideas of how to put your ideas together. That'll become especially important with papers 2 and 3 because we'll be using more quoted sources from the readings that we're doing. So in this video, I'm just going to keep it short and just going to give you some reminders. I want to urge you again to make sure you email me if you have any questions. I do have the open office hours coming up tomorrow, actually. I'm filming this here on Monday, the 13th, and then tomorrow on Tuesday, the what is that day, the 14th, at 2:30. Just wanted to check the time. I do have open office hours if you want to log in, if you have time. It's optional, but if you had questions and you wanted to join me and other students from your class, feel free to do so. Any questions, I'm happy to answer. A couple other things I want to mention before I have my list here of reminders for you on my whiteboard that I'll talk about in a second. Make sure if you send me a draft to take a look at, make sure that you activate the edit access on it, especially if you're using Google Docs. Just make sure that I have access to it so I can edit it. That goes for your papers too when you turn them in. It's not a big deal if you forget to do it. I'll send you an edit request, but that allows me to put in comments and to make any suggested corrections to the essays. A couple of things also, just in terms of turning them in. The format for the paper is all listed on the directions, so please make sure you take a look at that. So read through the directions. I keep repeating that in these videos, but that will really help you because everything you need to know is there: where to put your name at the top of the paper, what font to use, the fact that you have to double space it, all that's on the directions that I went through in the video for last week. So please make sure you read that over. Same thing goes for the directions on quoting from Mike Rose at the end of your essay. So with that said, let me just show you some of my main reminders here as you get ready to turn in your first paper for the class. As I said just a couple of minutes ago, make sure you review the directions. My directions can be kind of long, but they're there to cover pretty much everything. I always try to imagine someone, wrapping up a paper and having the directions in front of them and just using it as a kind of checklist just to make sure you've covered everything. What I used to do when I was an undergraduate is, we would get actual printed assignment sheets for most of my classes that had papers in them. And so when I was writing papers, I would always have, as I've probably mentioned before, a highlighter near me so I could highlight key ideas in the directions that I was getting from my papers so that I would know. Again, I used it as a checklist when I was writing papers as an undergraduate, and even through grad school, I used to do that. So in this case, read the directions, use them as a checklist to make sure you're covering everything. If anything is not clear, just send me an email and I'd be happy to clarify. I've talked with some of you over Zoom one-on-one to go through your drafts, and I'm happy to do that as well if you'd like to talk with me. So just a couple of reminders for the structure of the paper. Make sure in your opening paragraph that you are stating your main idea. Now, remember, in this paper, you have to introduce the skills that you're going to be writing about for whatever job it is that's your subject. Now, that could be a job or a volunteer experience that you had. It could be a job or volunteer experience that maybe a sibling or a parent had. Whatever the case might be, make sure you identify what the job is in the first paragraph. And again, at least 2 to 3 skills that the person, in your case, if it's you, what skills did you have to develop to do the job well? So that's part of your main idea, and it will help you structure the middle of the paper, as I said in the video last week. That relates to example 2 here, is make sure when you're writing that the examples you give in the body of the paper relate to the thesis. So be careful of digressions, which means, try not to get off topic. Remember that this paper is on the skills needed for the job. You're using Morrison and Mike Rose as sort of your models for this essay. So you want to make sure that your body paragraphs match up with your thesis. So in other words, do you have 2 or 3 body paragraphs? Probably 3 at least with this one, maybe even 4 paragraphs that match up with the ideas that you introduced in the opening paragraph. So that's something to check for as you read the final draft before you turn it into me. And then lastly, and this is also on the directions, we're going to do more with this with the second paper that I'll be putting up on Blackboard. The assignment will be up on Blackboard this week. But make sure you're citing everything in MLA format. Now, MLA is real quick. It's the Modern Language Association. It's the organization that establishes a lot of these rules for citations in these kind of papers for humanities and literature and English courses. So that's why we call it MLA, for the organization that does those rules and comes up with updates on there every few years. So at the end of your directions, as I had mentioned last week too in the other videos, there's an overview of how to do your works cited. You can simply cut and paste it if you'd want it to at the end. And it also shows you how to cite the Mike Rose essay correctly in MLA format. So please take a look at those directions, make sure that you're citing them correctly. Remember, do not use any other sources for this paper. The only source you should be using is your own imagination, your own memory, the interview, I guess, if you've talked to someone else for your paper, and the Mike Rose piece. If you want to refer to the Toni Morrison, you can. Most people don't typically. That's sort of an extra reading for this first assignment. But the Mike Rose, you should have that one quotation at the end. So just keep that in mind. No other sources for this are not needed and they're not necessary. And there's really no place for them because it's really your experience that you're writing about. And then making some kind of a comparison at the end to Mike Rose's essay, particularly what he says about his mom and maybe his uncle too. So what else can I tell you for this paper? I look forward to reading it. I'll have them back to you next week when you turn them in this week, with comments and any suggested edits. Later in the semester, you'll also have a revision assignment. So if you have one of these earlier papers that maybe isn't your strongest work, you will have the opportunity to revise one paper later in the semester of your choice. And all these papers build on each other. That's the last thing I want to mention. And I think I addressed that a little bit last week. And by that, what I mean is that every time I turn a paper back to you, I'm going to give you comments at the end, not just on that paper itself, but also on what to do for the next essay. So every assignment builds on the one that comes before in this class. So that's why it's so critical. And that's why I've said it's so important for you to get me the papers on these due dates so that I can get them back to you the following week with my comments and suggestions, so that way you've got a foundation for what to work on with the next paper that you're going to do. Okay. So anyway, just a quick video, some last reminders as you get ready to turn these papers in this week. I hope to see some of you tomorrow on Tuesday here at the little open office hours that I'll have tomorrow afternoon. But again, if you can't make that because of other classes or work, just send me an email. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Last thing I should mention, if you have a really pressing question on the paper, make sure to at least get me that question or anything else you need me to clarify, at least by the day before the paper is due. Once the day comes around that the paper is due, I'm typically grading other papers from other classes, and I've got maybe drafts from other classes coming in. So if you really want me to take a look at a draft of a paper you've written, if you can get it to me even 2 days before the due date, that's even better because it gives me more time to take a look at it. So just something to keep in mind as we go forward. I'm always happy to read drafts, but the sooner you get me the draft, the more time I'm going to have to give you feedback on it. And I'm happy to give you as much feedback as I can, particularly if you're stuck on the paper. So don't worry about that. Get stuck, get in touch with me over email or meet me over Zoom, and we can go through your paper and hopefully give you some ideas for how to finish it. All right, so that's it for now. Rosie's not here. She's having dinner right now. My wife, Allison, is also having dinner, so I'm just doing some last minute stuff. Everybody else here in the house is finished with work for today, so I'm going to log off pretty soon myself. Hope you have a great evening. And again, if you have any questions, please send me an email, and I will see you later. Bye.